The deed to the land felt almost like a joke in Elias Boone's hand. 25 cents for 12 acres, less than he'd ever paid for a sack of flour. But the clerk at the county office hadn't been laughing when he signed it over. The man's eyes had darted around the room and his voice dropped low when he muttered, "Ain't nobody else gonna touch that land, Boone. Best keep to yourself out there." The trail that led him to his new home wound narrow through waist-high grass, a path half swallowed by the wild. His horse snorted uneasily as the cabin came into view. A single room of stacked logs, its stone chimney crooked, its windows clouded with grime so black they looked like blind eyes. Elias swung down from the saddle and pressed a hand to one of the logs. Solid, sturdy, a place he could make his own. He had slept in worse, under the open sky with only coyotes for company. At least here, there were 4 walls and a roof that might keep the rain off his bones. But the place had a stillness about it that set his teeth on edge. The grass leaned heavy around the foundation, as though no hand had cut it in years. No birdsong touched the trees nearby. Even the wind seemed to hush itself when it passed over the roof. Elias told himself it was just his imagination, but a man who had drifted across half the frontier knew when land wanted him, or when it didn't. He set his pack down inside the cabin and began clearing what he could. The air was thick with dust and the sour musk of mice, but the bones of the place held strong. As he pried up a loose floorboard to patch it, his knife blade struck something hard. Beneath the wood was a small lockbox, nailed tight between the joists. Its lid bore a rusted iron lock fused shut with age. Elias tugged at it until his fingers ached, but it wouldn't give. He shoved it back under and pressed the board down. Whatever secrets it held weren't his business. Not yet. By evening, he saddled his horse and rode into town for supplies. Folks stared as he passed. Some tipped their hats politely. Others turned their faces away. In the saloon, voices hushed. When he walked in, a few men watched him with narrow eyes, as though they already knew where he had staked his claim. Sheriff Maddox Clay, a man weathered by years behind a badge, leaned against the bar. "Boone," he said in his gravelly drawl, "you got yourself a bargain, but I'll tell you plain. That cabin's a grave marker more than a home. Blood's been spilled on that dirt. Don't dig too deep." Elias only nodded, though the words cut colder than the whiskey in his throat. He'd lived long, enough to know that towns carried ghosts. Some wore chains, others wore secrets. The next day, Clara May Hartwell appeared at his door. She was a young widow, her dress neat but patched, her eyes kind yet wary. She carried a basket of bread and preserves. "Figured you could use a bite," she said softly, glancing past him into the dim cabin. Then her voice dropped lower. "You'll hear things at night out here. Don't go chasing after them." Elias thanked her, though he could see she was uneasy just standing on the threshold. As she walked back down the dirt path, her figure small against the endless grass, he wondered what truths she wasn't saying. That night, the cabin settled into silence as he lay on his cot. Then came the sound, soft crunching, like boots on dry grass outside the window. He rose, rifle in hand, and eased to the door. When he swung it open, only the empty yard greeted him, the grass swaying under a restless moon. No footprints, no shadows but his own. Still, he did not sleep much after. By the 3rd day, he turned his hand to the old well beside the cabin. The rope had rotted, the bucket long gone, so he set to clearing the stone lip and digging deeper. His spade struck soil, then something hollow. The sound rang different, muffled and wooden. Elias scraped the dirt away until the shape of a rotted lid appeared, sunken deep beneath the earth. The hair along his neck stiffened. He'd dug up enough shallow graves on the frontier to know the weight of what might lie beneath. Still, curiosity burned in him hotter than caution. He dropped his spade, crouched low, and brushed the soil from the edges with his hands. By the time the sun began to fall, he had uncovered enough to see iron bands stretched across the lid. A chest, long buried, its padlock broken, as though someone had forced it open once before. He leaned on his spade, sweat dripping from his brow, staring down at the thing that had slept beneath his new land for God knows how many years. His gut told him to cover it back, to let sleeping earth keep its secrets. But the frontier had never been kind to cowards. Hooves thundered in the distance. Elias straightened, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing at the trail. 3 riders cut dark shapes. Against the dying light, their silhouettes long and lean as they came fast up the dirt path. He could see their hats, their rifles, the glint of steel at their belts. Outlaws. They rode hard for the cabin, dust rising behind them like a storm. Elias glanced once more at the chest half pulled from the ground, then at the figures bearing down on him. He chambered around and set his boots wide in the soil. The wind carried their voices across the yard. "That don't belong to you, drifter." Elias Boone raised his rifle. The secret of the cabin had just drawn its keepers home. The riders came on like a storm, their horses foaming, the thunder of hooves shaking the earth around the little cabin. Elias Boone stood rigid beside the well, the half-buried chest yawning up at him like a mouth. He leveled his rifle, the stock. Snug against his shoulder, eyes narrowed against the setting sun. The 3 men reined up a few yards from him, dust swirling around their boots. The one in front, lean as a whip, with a scar carved down his cheek, spat into the dirt. "Step. Away from that chest, stranger. Ain't yours. Never was." Elias said nothing. The rifle in his hands was answer enough. The man with the scar grinned. "Name's Jeb Harrow. My brothers here, Tom and Wade. You'll be making their acquaintance proper if you don't lay that iron down." The name cut through Elias's memory like a knife. Harrow. He'd heard whispers of them in the saloon, wolves in men's skins, whose father had ruled these hills with a gang of cutthroats. Elias cocked the hammer back. "Chest is on my land. My land was bought fair." "That land was cursed with blood long before you laid your quarter down," Jeb said. His grin died into a snarl. "Last chance. Step aside." For a moment the prairie held its breath. Then Elias fired. The shot cracked sharp, echoing into the hills. Wade Harrow toppled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder with a howl. The horses reared, the brothers wheeling away in a spray of dirt. Elias ducked low as bullets spat back, thudding into the cabin wall. He sprinted for the doorway, diving inside as splinters rained. When the gunfire ceased, he risked a glance through the blackened window. The Harrows were retreating, dragging their wounded kin, but not gone. Jeb's voice carried over the wind. "We'll be back, drifter, and next time, we'll burn you out." Elias's pulse hammered in his ears. He turned back to the chest, dirt still clinging to its sides. With the butt of his rifle, he battered at the iron bands until they gave. The wood splintered, the lid yawning open. Inside lay bones. A man's skeleton collapsed in on itself, wrapped in the tatters of a blood-stained shirt. Beside it, 3 rotting sacks of silver coins, their dull gleam mocking the grave they'd bought. Elias staggered back, bile rising in his throat. Whoever this man was, he had been buried with the loot and left to rot in silence. The next morning, Clara May Hartwell returned with more food. She found Elias sitting on the porch, rifle across his knees, his eyes shadowed by what he'd seen. He showed her the chest, her face drained of color. "So it's true," she whispered. "They said the Harrow's father and his gang cut down miners years ago, took their silver. Sheriff found 1 body, but the rest—" She trailed off, shivering. The town kept quiet. Folks were too afraid to speak against the Harrows. Easier to bury the truth. Sheriff Maddox arrived not long after, his jaw tight when Elias revealed the bones. "Damn fools, the lot of us," the sheriff muttered. "We let wolves roam free, thinking silence was peace. Now the bills come due. That night, Elias made his choice. He could leave, ride hard, and vanish as he always had. But he'd seen enough cowardice. The land was his, the chest his burden now. He would not let the Harrows take it back. He set to work. By lantern light, he dug shallow trenches around the cabin, filling them with brush and kindling for fire traps. He reinforced the door with planks, loaded every cartridge he owned, and set his spare rifle where Clara May could reach it. She refused to leave. "You'll not face them alone," she said, voice trembling but firm. When night fell, they came. 5 riders this time, torches blazing, firelight licking across their faces. Jeb Harrow rode at the front, teeth bared. Burn. "Him out!" he roared. The torches arced through the air, flames hissing as they struck the dry grass. The prairie caught quick, fire running like wild dogs toward the cabin. Gunfire cracked. Elias fired back, each shot a thunderclap in the dark. Clara May reloaded with trembling hands, her jaw clenched. The first of the Harrow men fell near the porch, his torch dropping useless into the dirt. The others circled wide, bullets sparking off the stone chimney. Elias's traps caught one rider, a trench of brush bursting into flame beneath his horse, sending man and beast screaming into the night. But the cabin was burning. Smoke rolled thick, stinging eyes and throat. Elias coughed, his lungs clawing for air, as Clara May pulled water from a bucket, dousing the walls where she could. Then came the sheriff. Maddox rode in hard, his rifle already barking. He shouted over the roar of fire. "Time's up, Harrow," Jeb sneered, his eyes wild in the glow. "You ain't man enough to finish this, Sheriff." The final battle came at the well, where it had all begun. Elias, blackened with soot, faced Jeb Harrow across the chest that had cursed the land. Jeb lunged, knife flashing. The 2 men grappled in the dirt, Elias's muscles straining as the outlaw drove the blade closer. With a heave, Elias twisted, sending Jeb crashing into the chest. The outlaw fell, his head striking the iron bands with a sickening crack. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of dying fire. The Harrow gang scattered into the night, their curse broken with their leader's fall. Sheriff Maddox stood over the chest, silver coins spilling into the dirt. "All these years," he murmured. "All this death for a few damned bags of silver." Elias wiped the blood from his brow, his chest heaving. Clara May took his arm, steadying him. The cabin behind them smoldered, its walls charred but still standing. When dawn came, the prairie lay quiet. Ash drifted on the breeze, but the sky was clear, painted gold. Elias looked out across the 12 acres, his land now bought not with a coin, but with blood, fire, and truth. For 25 cents, he had not just bought a cabin, he had bought a reckoning. And with it perhaps a place to finally belong.